going on in Rafah and Gaza right now? We'll bring in journalist Javed Rana from Pakistan to discuss the latest developments from the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Javed, welcome once again here on A News. This is a devastating moment for the Gazans, as I know. Rafah was the only step that they can take themselves out from the situation. But now they are locked inside. What would you say about this?
Obviously, absolutely, it is devastating. And it means this was the last survival abode for the Palestinian people in Gaza. Now that has come under attack from air and from ground. The only crossing which had giving some kind of concession to the Palestinians to move back and forth at a limited scale towards Egyptians, particularly those tens of thousands of wounded Palestinian patients. Now that has been blocked. It means no more aid, whatever the leftover, maybe at a small scale, some aid was being brought in. I think that route has already been blocked. So I think what does it really mean in a broader picture when at a time when the Hamas had accepted the terms and the conditions of a kind of a ceasefire that was agreed between Israel and Hamas via Qatar and Egypt, and the Americans were facilitating it. And I think we have to understand it's not the Americans which is so-called one of the greatest power. I don't call it a superpower anymore. Israel, the more particularly Netanyahu, has been dictating his terms. Just within last 48 hours, we have heard Netanyahu directly saying that we will go into the Rafah no matter what international pressure is. Israel simply doesn't listen to European Union, doesn't listen to the Americans. The reason being is that the pressure is not there at a scale which deserve to be the case. European countries, particularly Germany, the Americans, they have not suspended the supplies of the weapons. That is a bigger problem. They have not put pressure on Israel to accept the deal. Basically, it was a kind of a bluff that Netanyahu had come up with, sending delegation to Cairo, having negotiations with the Hamas indirectly through Egyptians and Qataris. But when Hamas called off that bluff, Israel military is there with a ground offensive. That indicates that right from the day one, Netanyahu didn't want this to happen. The only reason that he was having so-called negotiations with the Hamas through these interlocutors was simple, that he was trying to basically subside the pressure coming from the Western countries, and also the pressure which has been coming from the domestic audience, because still there are more than 130 prisoners of war which are with the Hamas. And I think he tried to basically cool down public pressure inside Israel. I think that bluff has been called off. Now we have to see a bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the pressure inside Israel is not there on Netanyahu. This lobby of prisoners of war is it doesn't have much influence, and it does not represent a larger public. We have to see a survey back in January this year where there is at least 97% support for genocide. Inside Israel, there is 97% support for the genocide in Gaza. And hardly 1 to 2 or 3% people, they are against the war. And I think that lobby is basically, they have some sympathies with the prisoners of war. Over the course of last 7 decades, I think the people inside Israel have been completely brainwashed. They believe that the Palestinians are human animals, they deserve to be killed. And this is not a secret, by the way. Netanyahu has said, and the other far-right leaders have time and again said that they want to depopulate Gaza and reoccupy it, and want to push them to the Egyptian side of the border, which Egypt did not allow. So now I think it's a very terrible situation whereby on one side, Americans and Europeans, they stand exposed. And on the other, we see also the Egyptians and the Qataris are helpless, and Netanyahu is dictating his terms, no matter at what cost. If more tens of thousands of people are killed in Rafah crossing, that doesn't matter at all to the Israel, and that does not matter to the powers that matter in the West. Reason being is that Israel has been remotely controlling them. So in a broader picture, then look at the humanitarian side. There are at least 600,000 children among 1.5 million population in and around Rafah crossing. What will happen to them? They were moved from the north to the south of Gaza, from south to the Khan Yunis to the Rafah crossing. What is the next destination? And then so-called safe zones. Israel has been saying, we've been shifting, we've been relocating the Gaza population to the safe zone. Going by that track record, all these safe zones were attacked by bomb. They were bombed by Israel Air Force. And again, thousands of people were killed. So again, we have to see a bigger picture. Israel is simply not listening to anyone. Israel, the apartheid state, knows that Arabs are dormant. Basically, apartheid state has already won over the silence of the Arab world, the Muslim world, and some resistance is coming from Iran. And then we have seen Turkey, they having some kind of trade embargo on Israel. I think I have not seen any practical measure from the Muslim countries and also from the West. That is why we have seen that this has emboldened, encouraged, abetted Israel to continue with its genocide war on people in Gaza.
And in addition to that, actually, as you mentioned, it is quite important to highlight that even Netanyahu himself and some far-right parties in Israel are claiming that the Palestinians are quote-unquote not humans. So, but there are, of course, like in everywhere, there are people in Israel who opposes this situation, and they are protesting to Netanyahu that they want the war to end and they want to ceasefire to happen, as Palestine said with Egypt and Qatar. They can agree to do that, and they are making pressure on Netanyahu at the moment. Would you think that this pressure is going to work or not?
Well, I think it is hard to predict in which direction the situation will take the turn. But the fact that the Hamas has called off the bluff of Netanyahu by accepting the terms and conditions, therefore, I think it is very difficult to foresee that the Netanyahu would listen. Now, he has been saying that, no, we have not launched a ground offensive. It is a very limited, at a limited scale. He's a peddling lies like always. It is a ground offensive. They have taken over the Rapha Crossing. That means effectively blocking the aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. And again, the point, I will again quote the same survey, 60% population of Israel, they are in favor of blocking aid of Palestinians. There have been attacks on the aid trucks and the aid workers, and there have been incidents where the Israeli directly block the aid trucks. So they are least bothered about what happens in Gaza. So I think Israel would not listen to the pressure. And if it listens pressure, that will come from the domestic side, and that pressure somehow the other is not there. The far right coalition of which is a part and parcel, I think they simply want Netanyahu to go ahead with this operation because they believe that until and unless they eliminate Hamas from Gaza, the threat would prevail. My understanding is that this is not going to happen. There are still 80% strength, the numerical strength, the military strength of Hamas is intact. They've been firing rockets from the Rafah region and from other parts of Gaza into Israel. That shows that they still have the strength and they have still numerical military force whereby they can counter. I think there is a possibility that if they go inside this particular location of Rapha Crossing and the adjoining area, I think there is a possibility of a large-scale casualties. And the problem for Netanyahu is that if this deal is accepted, which Hamas has accepted, that means at the end of the day, there is some light in the tunnel. And that light is that Israel will have to withdraw forces from Gaza, and there has to be a permanent ceasefire. And against each prisoner of war, Israeli prisoner of war, 50 Palestinian prisoners would be released. And that is a very complicated phase-wise ceasefire deal. The point is that would leave Netanyahu as somebody who's defeated. Because unless Hamas is completely defeated from Israel's perspective, the threat would exist. My understanding is that the Hamas is an ideology, it would always exist. The bombing of Israel, the genocide war of Israel, that is a biggest source of recruitment for Hamas. Before October 7th, when Hamas launched operation inside apartheid state, there was 50% unemployment inside Gaza. Now 70% Gaza has been destroyed. No sources of livelihood. This means now there is almost 80–90% people who are deadly against Israel. They would all make up the form of Hamas military force in future. Israel doesn't understand it. And this is, by the way, a standard understanding by the international commentator and everybody that you cannot eliminate Hamas ideology.
Lastly, I would also like to ask you your take on this situation right now. The people in Rafah are actually in a prison, in an open-air prison, as we were always calling the Gaza city, but right now it is even getting more hectic. Do you think that the international people, do you think that the international organizations are going to react to this situation?
Well, obviously, the reaction is already there in the West. The public is with the Palestinian people. The public is against this genocidal war. And we have seen at least 30 universities in the USA. They have launched a protest. They've been occupying parts of the universities. They want to divest the universities' investment into these arms companies, and also deep inside Israel, because there are companies where they have invested. The scale of the investment of the university is not known, and the students want to make it public and disinvest from all these kind of dealings with the Israel. That is not happening. But again, at the same time, we have to understand that this so-called anti-Semitic attacks, the incidents, they have gone up to at least 400% since October 7. That shows the public resentment against Israel. I think that does not abode well for the Jewish community, and we know that not everyone among the Jewish community, they are supporting this Zionist regime, but I think they are going to lose it. And at the end of the day, my understanding of the situation is that the pressure would build up in the West, in the UK, particularly in the USA, whereby Israel would not be able to dictate its terms as it used to be. Things are fast changing. The public mode has changed altogether. The public has reacted, but again, the public is not holding the guns to control the situation. It is the government of USA, which is the Congress of the USA. They are all being remotely controlled by the Jewish lobby, which everybody knows is very, very strong in the USA. And I think that is the biggest problem. That is why we have seen the $26 billion military aid is on their way. It will reach somehow or the other to the Israel. So all these political rhetorics coming from USA that they are against this war, they want a ceasefire. Look at what they have done when this was taken up by the UN Security Council. They've simply vetoed. The USA doesn't want a ceasefire. The reason is, as Pentagon chief said, that Israel faces a strategic defeat. Now, strategic defeat means that if Hamas is not eliminated altogether, which is next to impossible, Israel would lose this war. And what is at stake? Stake is that the myth of Israel military being invincible has shattered. The myth of its intelligence network, Mossad, being invincible has shattered. So, and then the myth of Israeli technology being parallel to none has already shattered. And because on October 7th, Hamas soldiers, they went deep inside the occupied territories. They froze their internet connections, communication setup. All those cameras were frozen, which means the technology has collapsed. And similarly, there was intelligence failure about October 7th military operation by Hamas inside Israel. And similarly, their so-called military invincibility is not there. We know that Israel has been largely relying upon Air Force. It has been conducting a genocide by carpet bombing. The ground offensive has not been as much strong as has been the air raids. So I think in a broader picture, Israel faces a military defeat. It can and it has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. Nearly 41 to 42,000 people have been killed. If we include those people who are still under the rebels, 75,000 people have been injured. That is their success because they want to depopulate Palestine. And one of the far-right ministers has publicly threatened that nuclear option is one of the options Israel must use against the Palestinian people. So I think it's a shameful on the part of the apartheid state, but they are not listening to anyone. That is the bigger part of the problem.
Thank you so much, Javed, for here joining us. I hope that we can talk about much more lighthearted stuff, but it seems, as you mentioned, the situation is going to get only worse from now on. Thank you.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geo-strategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geo-strategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.